Hello and welcome to the Creative Career Toolkit. My name is Andrew Macklin. I'm an actor. I'm also a qualified and ICF accredited career coach. In each one of the videos in this series, we'll be looking at a different tool that you can apply to the projects you're working on at the moment or your creative career as a whole in order to create some new options for yourself and hopefully move yourself forward. So the tool that we're going to look at today is scaling. Quite often when people come to coaching, there can be a sense that all of the traditional markers that they use to mark their progression in a career are outside of themselves. Whether I'm cast in that particular production, whether my painting is accepted to a gallery or not. And with this constant external way of marking our careers, we can often feel a little bit disillusioned, a little bit disheartened, and like it's predominantly out of our control. So one way to regain that for ourselves is begin to create a context for ourselves in which we can track our own career. And one of the ways in which you can do that that's really simple is this scaling tool. So what I want you to do is just take a piece of paper and a pen, just draw a line across it, mark 0 on one end and 10 on the other. And then I want you to incrementally mark the other marks as we go from 1 up to 10. I want you to imagine that 0 is the point at which you decided to embark on your current career path. So that might have been 20 years ago when you decided to be an actor. It might have been 2 years ago when you decided to shift from directing into writing. Or whatever that might be for you. I want you to decide that 10, I want you to make that place in your career that you ultimately want to end up at. So that place that is most meaningful and fulfilling for you, whatever that image might be. So to suspend reality for the moment and just leave your mind drift. So mark that in your mind just mentally for yourself now. What I'd like to do next is just to instinctively pick a number to represent where you are on that journey at the moment. Whether that be a 2 or a 5 or an 8, whatever it is for you, just let your instincts draw your hand to that point and place yourself down there. Now there's several ways in which I think this is useful when working with clients. One that I found is that when people mark themselves at a 7 or 8 and they do this exercise, they often realize for the first time that I've actually done quite a lot of work up to this point, that there's a lot of knowledge and skills that they've developed over this period of time that they've sort of been discounting in some way. So it can shift from feeling like they've been moving a rock up a never-ending mountain into suddenly realizing that actually they've gone over the crest of that mountain and they're on the way down. And they're coming down with a lot of skills and a lot of experience and a lot of know-how that they hadn't fully taken on board. And that can shift the way in which they might choose to act next. So instead of perhaps a feeling of asking for crumbs professionally, they may begin to start asking for cake and their appropriate slices of it. So it begins to shift their sense of themselves and the sense of what's possible. If you've marked yourself down on the bottom side of the scale, so around 1 or a 2, I often notice when working with students that they can often realize for themselves that they are at a 1 or a 2 on their journey and that they've been putting an unnatural amount of weight on themselves, this unrealistic expectation that they should be at a 9 or a 10, when in reality they're at the beginning of their journey and they can afford to take a bit more time. And by taking this perspective, by recognizing that they're at the beginning of that journey, it can give them a sense of ease about what they choose to do next, which often produces a bit more variety. That actually maybe I'll spend some time investigating this before I move on to my next stage in the career. So that can be really useful. If you mark yourself down as a 5 and you're an optimist, then you've got the best of both worlds. So there's the recognition of the skills that you've already developed, but also the acknowledgement that there is more to be done and more development to be had. There's another 2 ways in which this tool I think is particularly useful, and one is about creating milestones for ourselves. So if you have marked yourself down as a 7, what would 8 and 9 represent on the way to that 10? So what are the main key events that would mark that 8 and 9? So if, for example, that 10 for you is having a film that you produced being shown internationally, then that 8 might be you finishing the script and that 9 might be you pitching that film. It's not so important now that we link it to reality so much. It's more important that we begin to create a bit of a conceptual line from where we are to where we want to be. Just one possibility of it. Another way of using this line is to begin to chunk down our next actions. So if we're at a 2 or a 3 or even an 8, it can often feel like that 10 is so far beyond us, so far away from what we are currently at, that we can have this rabbit in the headlight feeling. That actually I'm numbed by how big that challenge is or how far away it is, and so I don't feel like I can do anything about it. And that's quite a common feeling. And quite often that can be down to the fact that we are basing what we think is possible of ourselves in the future based on what we're currently capable to do. And we can often forget that actually over time we can develop the skills that we need and the connections that we need to make that thing feel more possible for ourselves. So it's important to acknowledge that at this point, to go that there is time for me to develop some of those skills that might make that thing feel a bit more possible. Now this chunking works to take the rabbit out of the headlights by basically asking, if you're at a 5, what would a 5.1 be? Or a 5.2? So what is one small, easily achievable action that I can take in the next 24 hours or a week that would bring me just 1 point closer to my 10? Now that might be a simple email that you might send, it might be doing a bit more research or having a chat with a friend that works in that area that could give you a bit more insight or information. So whatever that 1 is for you, or that 2, just mark it down for yourself now. If there's a few options, mark a few of them down. So this begins to create a bit of movement for ourselves when before we were just stuck. So the next stage with that would be to pick one of those that you feel comfortable and confident to do, and sometime over the next 24 hours or next week to pick a time in which you will go about doing that. And quite often when clients come back having done this, actually quite a lot has shifted. So they may have felt that they were at a 5, but actually from that one conversation or that one email, they've realized or found some new information that has pointed to the fact that actually they're further down the line than they thought. And actually the goal might begin to shift in an interesting way and more things might seem possible. So although that 5.1 might seem like a small step, in reality, actually, the effects of it can be quite big and quite productive. So that is our scaling system. And like I said, it's a really useful one to apply to your career as a whole, or indeed any individual project. And it's a great way of reclaiming our own autonomy and sense of control over our careers by creating our own context for it, mapping our progress, and then deciding for ourselves what the best next steps are. I've been Andrew Macklin. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and I'll see you on the next Creative Career Toolkit.